We got this story from one of our subscribers. He wished to remain anonymous, but his account chilled us to the core. It's a tale he insists is true, a memory he and his friends have tried to forget for years. This is what he told us. It happened a long time ago, back when my friends and I were in our 20s. We were just a group of young adults looking to escape the city for a quiet, cozy Christmas together. Leah had the idea. She found this old Victorian house online, tucked away in some tiny, snow-covered village no one had ever heard of. "It'll be perfect," she'd said, showing us pictures of a charming house surrounded by pine trees. No distractions, just us, a fire, and snow for miles. It sounded great. We were all in. The drive out to the village took hours, most of it spent winding through narrow, tree-lined roads. The snow started halfway through the trip, at first light and peaceful. But by the time we reached the outskirts of the village, it was coming down hard, turning everything into a blinding sheet of white. We should have turned back then. When we finally arrived, the village was strange, empty. It wasn't just the kind of quiet you'd expect from a small town in winter. It was something else entirely. There were no Christmas lights, no cars, no people. The houses lining the streets were dark, their windows shuttered, their roofs heavy with untouched snow. "Where is everyone?" Claire asked from the back seat, her voice quiet, almost like she was afraid someone might hear her. "They're probably all at church or something." "It's Christmas Eve," Ethan said. He always had a way of brushing things off, but even he sounded unsure. "Yeah, but all of them?" Jamie muttered, leaning forward between the seats to get a better look. His breath fogged up the window, and he wiped it away, squinting as we passed another house. No lights, no decorations. Not even a wreath. "That's weird, right?" No one answered. Leah tightened her grip on the wheel, her eyes fixed on the narrow road ahead. The snow was coming down harder now, making it tough to see more than a few feet in front of us. The GPS insisted we were close, but the town felt endless, stretching on in its eerie, frozen silence. When we finally reached the house, it didn't look much better. It stood at the very edge of the village, half hidden by towering pine trees. The paint was peeling, and icicles hung from the sagging gutters like jagged teeth. It didn't look anything like the pictures online. The photos must have been taken years ago, before the place started to rot. "This is it," Ryan said, his voice heavy with doubt. He leaned out of the car to get a better look at the place. "This doesn't scream Merry Christmas. It screams, run while you still can." "Come on, it's just old," Leah said, forcing a smile as she killed the engine. "It's got character." We all laughed, too loud, too forced. No one wanted to admit how wrong this felt. The inside wasn't much better. The air was damp and cold, the kind of cold that seeped into your bones no matter how many layers you had on. We found the thermostat, but it didn't seem to be working. Leah promised us there'd be wood for the fireplace, so we searched the house until we found a stack of logs in a dark, cobweb-filled corner of the basement. The fire helped, but only a little. Even with the flames crackling, the shadows in the corners of the room felt too thick. "It's just a little rough around the edges," Leah said, trying to rally everyone's spirits. "Once we get settled in, it'll be fine." But no one unpacked right away. We stayed in the living room, huddled close to the fire as the snow outside turned heavier, muting the world beyond the frost-covered windows. For a while, we didn't talk much. It felt wrong to disturb the silence. When the first creak came from upstairs, it was faint, just enough to make us all stop and glance at the ceiling. "It's an old house," Leah said quickly, her smile stretched thin. "Old houses make noise." She might have believed that. The rest of us weren't so sure. The first night, we told ourselves it was just nerves. New places always feel a little strange, and the oppressive quiet of the village didn't help. Still, none of us could sleep easily. I lay awake in my room for what felt like hours, staring at the ceiling. The house was too quiet. No distant hum of cars, no wind through the trees, not even the faint creaks and groans you expect from an old place. I told myself that should have been comforting, but it wasn't. Somewhere around midnight, I heard it again. The same creak we'd heard earlier. A single, deliberate sound, like someone stepping cautiously on the floorboards. It came from upstairs, or maybe the attic. I couldn't tell. I held my breath, straining to hear more, but the silence swallowed everything again. I wasn't about to investigate. Not alone. The next morning, the unease clung to all of us like the cold. Jamie joked over breakfast about the noisy house ghosts, but his laugh was a little too sharp. Leah suggested we get out of the house for a while and explore the village, which sounded like a great idea. Anything to avoid staying inside. But the village didn't feel any better in daylight. The streets were still deserted, the houses blanketed in thick layers of snow, their windows like dark, unblinking eyes. We knocked on a few doors to ask if there was a market or a cafe nearby, but no one answered. "This is insane," Ryan muttered, kicking at a lump of ice in the road. "Where the hell is everyone? It's Christmas Eve, for crying out loud. You'd think someone would at least have decorations up. Maybe they all went out of town," Ethan suggested, though he didn't sound convinced. Claire stopped in her tracks and turned to face us. "No, this is wrong. It's not just empty. It's like..." She trailed off, shivering. "Like what?" I pressed. "Like it's waiting," she whispered. We all fell silent, standing in the middle of the snow-covered street, surrounded by abandoned homes. The only sound was the wind whistling faintly through the alleyways. Leah clapped her hands together, forcing a cheery tone. "Okay, maybe the village isn't much of a tourist destination. But hey, we got the house, right? Let's make the best of it. Tonight, we'll cook dinner, play some games, make it a real Christmas." That evening, we did our best to follow Leah's lead. The fire in the living room was roaring, the scent of pine and hot cocoa filled the air, and for a little while, things almost felt normal. Claire even found an old record player in the corner and dusted it off, setting the mood with some scratchy holiday tunes. But as the night wore on, the strange little things started piling up. It began with the window in the kitchen. Ethan swore he closed it earlier, but when he went to grab something from the counter, it was wide open, letting in a frigid draft. "This house is falling apart," he muttered, shoving it shut again. But 5 minutes later, it was open again. Then there were the footprints. Claire was the first to notice them, just outside the living room window. A single set of tracks in the snow, leading up to the house and stopping right in front of the glass. "Someone's out there," she hissed, pulling the curtain closed. "Relax," Jamie said, peering outside. "It's probably just an animal." "An animal wearing boots?" Claire shot back. We all gathered around the window, squinting into the darkness. The footprints were clear, deep impressions in the snow, unmistakably human. But there was no one there. No movement, no sound. Just the tracks leading to the house and nothing leading away. Later that night, after we'd all gone to bed, I heard Claire's voice in the hallway. "Hello," she called softly. Her footsteps padded down the hall, toward the stairs. I crept out of my room, my heart pounding. "Claire," I whispered. She turned to look at me, her face pale in the dim light. "Did you hear it?" she asked. "Hear what?" "That voice." A woman's voice. She was calling me. The next morning, no one looked rested. Claire had dark circles under her eyes and wouldn't talk much over breakfast. Ryan kept glancing at the window, muttering something about the snow piling too high. Even Ethan, always the first to crack a joke, was quiet. The footprints outside were still there. The snow had stopped during the night, leaving the tracks frozen in place, leading up to the window and stopping. Ethan tried to laugh it off, saying it was probably one of us playing a prank, but no one seemed convinced, not even him. By mid-afternoon, the storm returned. Heavy flakes fell in silence, thickening the white curtain around the house. We tried to keep ourselves busy, cooking, playing cards, scrolling aimlessly on our phones. But the growing sense of unease was impossible to ignore. It was Leah who suggested checking out the attic. She thought it might be fun to see if there were any old decorations or Christmas trinkets up there, something to make the house feel less hollow. None of us liked the idea, but no one wanted to admit it either. The attic stairs were stiff and narrow, creaking loudly with every step. The space itself was cramped and cold, with a single, naked bulb hanging from the ceiling. Dust motes floated in the air, catching the faint light. And then we saw it. An old trunk sat in the corner, its lid slightly ajar. Claire hesitated, but Leah, always the brave one, stepped forward and flipped it open. Inside were faded photographs, yellowed papers, and a single book bound in cracked leather. "Wow," Leah murmured, pulling the book out. "It's some kind of journal." She thumbed through the pages, frowning. The handwriting was spidery and faint, but a few words jumped out immediately. "The snow, trapped, watching." Back downstairs, we all crowded around the journal, trying to decipher its entries. Most of it was incoherent rambling, but certain phrases stood out, sending chills down my spine. "They come with the snow. The house is their beacon. Do not stay past Christmas." "Well, that's cheerful," Jamie said, forcing a grin. "What do you think it means?" Claire asked, her voice trembling. "Nothing," Ethan said firmly, slamming the book shut. "It's just some old guy's scribbles. People write weird stuff all the time, especially if they're stuck out here for months on end. Then why write about the house?" Claire shot back. "Or the snow. Do not stay past Christmas? That doesn't sound like cabin fever, Ethan." Leah held up her hand. "Enough, okay? We're all letting this place get to us. It's just a creepy old journal. Nothing more." She glanced at the frost-rimmed windows. "Let's focus on tonight. We'll make dinner, watch some dumb holiday movie, and forget about this." "Agreed?" Reluctantly, we nodded, but the mood had already shifted. That journal, with its ominous warnings, lingered like a shadow over the room. As night fell, the storm outside raged harder than ever. Snow battered the windows, and the wind howled through the cracks in the old house. Dinner felt forced, everyone talking too loud, avoiding what we'd read. At one point, Claire got up to close the curtains and froze. "They're back," she whispered, her breath fogging up the glass. We all crowded around the window, and there they were, the footprints. A single line leading to the house, stopping at the front door this time. No one had gone outside since the storm started. "Okay, this is getting ridiculous," Ethan muttered. He grabbed a flashlight from the table and moved toward the door. "What are you doing?" Leah snapped. "Checking it out. Someone's messing with us. A neighbor, or some weirdo." He pulled open the door before anyone could stop him, letting in a gust of freezing air. "Ethan, no," Claire called after him, but he was already stepping out onto the porch. His flashlight beam cut through the swirling snow, sweeping over the empty street. There was no one there, no movement, no sound, just the steady fall of snow. But when he turned the light toward the ground, he froze. The footprints didn't start from the road. They didn't start at all. They just appeared. A perfect line, beginning out of nowhere and leading straight to the door. "Ethan," I called from the doorway, trying to hide the tremor in my voice. "Come back inside." He didn't answer right away. He just stared at the footprints, his face pale in the flashlight's glow. Finally, he stepped back inside and slammed the door shut behind him. "Okay," he said, his voice tight. "That was weird." "No kidding," Jamie muttered, pacing in a tight circle. "What the hell is going on?" "The footprints, the noises, that creepy journal. This isn't normal. It's just the storm messing with us," Leah insisted. But even she didn't sound sure anymore. Later that night, when we had all retreated to our rooms, I couldn't sleep again. The wind outside was relentless, scraping against the windows like claws. I was drifting in and out of uneasy dreams when I heard it. A low whisper, faint but unmistakable. At first I thought it was the wind, but it came again, clearer this time. A voice. "My name. Come outside," it whispered. I didn't want to leave my room. Every instinct told me to stay in bed, pull the blanket over my head, and wait for morning. But the voice was insistent, whispering my name again and again, soft and coaxing. "Come outside." I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block it out. But then I heard the creak of footsteps in the hallway, slow and deliberate. Someone was moving toward the front door. I scrambled out of bed, grabbing my phone for light, and crept to the door. The hallway was dim, lit only by the faint glow from the living room downstairs. The others' doors were closed. At the top of the stairs stood Claire. She was staring down at the front door, one hand outstretched as if she were about to open it. "Claire," I hissed, my voice trembling. She turned slowly, her eyes wide and unfocused. "Do you hear it?" she whispered. "She's calling us." "Oh," I asked, my stomach knotting. "The woman in the snow." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. "There's no one out there, Claire. It's just the wind or—" "No," she interrupted, shaking her head. "She's out there. I saw her. By the time I convinced Claire to step away from the door, the commotion had woken the others. Ethan and Ryan stumbled out of their rooms, both looking groggy and irritated, while Leah came down the stairs, her face pale. "What's going on?" Ethan asked, rubbing his eyes. "She was trying to go outside," I said, keeping my voice low. Leah frowned. "Why?" "She says there's someone out there." "There was someone," Claire insisted, her voice shaking. "A woman. She was standing in the snow, right at the edge of the trees. I saw her through the window." Ethan groaned. "Oh, come on. You were dreaming. You're letting that stupid journal get to you." Claire rounded on him, her expression fierce. "I wasn't dreaming, Ethan. I know what I saw." "Enough!" Leah snapped. "Look, none of us are thinking clearly right now. It's late, we're exhausted, and this storm isn't helping. Let's all go back to bed, and we'll figure this out in the morning." "Okay." Morning didn't bring any clarity. If anything, it brought more questions. The footprints were back. This time, they circled the house, weaving between the windows like someone, or something, had been pacing around us all night. And then we found the door. The basement door was wide open, even though we'd locked it the night before. A faint dusting of snow had blown in, frosting the stairs leading down into the dark. "Okay, no," Jamie said, shaking his head as he backed away. "I'm out. We're leaving. I don't care about the snow, or the roads, or any of it. We're getting in the car, and we're leaving." "We can't," Leah said quietly. "What do you mean we can't?" She held up her phone, showing the weather report. The storm had worsened overnight, burying the roads under nearly 6 feet of snow. No one was coming, not until the storm let up. That night, we decided to stay together in the living room, huddled around the fireplace like children afraid of the dark. No one said it, but we all felt it. The presence circling closer, pressing in. At some point, Leah suggested the seance. "It's insane," Ryan said immediately. "We're not doing that. Do you have a better idea?" Leah snapped. "Something is here, Ryan, and it's not going to stop until we face it. We need to figure out what it wants." We found candles in the kitchen and arranged them in a circle on the living room floor. Leah had the journal open in her lap, scanning the pages for anything that might help. "Okay," she said, her voice trembling. "We're going to ask it to come forward, to tell us why it's here, or it's just going to make things worse." Ethan muttered, but he stayed in the circle. None of us were willing to be alone. Leah closed her eyes and began to speak softly, calling out to whatever was haunting the house. The flames of the candles flickered, and the air grew colder, sharp enough to sting. For a long moment, nothing happened, and then Claire gasped. "It's here," she whispered, staring at the window. We all turned. The frost on the glass had begun to shift, forming long, jagged lines that almost looked like letters. L-E-A, Leah whispered, her voice cracking as the word finished forming. "Leave." The candle snuffed out all at once, plunging us into darkness. The frost letters on the window, "Leave," vanished the moment the candles snuffed out. The room plunged into darkness, the silence broken only by Claire's sharp breaths. I fumbled for my flashlight, but before I could turn it on, I felt it, a faint, icy breeze brushing the back of my neck. "Did you feel that?" Leah whispered. I couldn't answer. My throat was too dry. The candles flared back to life without warning, their flames unnaturally high, casting jagged shadows across the room. Leah gasped, clutching the journal as the pages began to flutter, as if an invisible hand was rifling through them. The journal stopped on a page near the end, the words "the basement" scrawled in jagged, uneven handwriting across the top. Beneath it, one sentence repeated over and over, the ink growing darker and messier with each line. "Do not open it. Do not open it. Do not open it. We have to go down there," Leah said suddenly. "No way," Jamie snapped, shaking his head furiously. "That's exactly what it wants. This is insane. What other choice do we have?" Leah shot back. "It's not going to stop. You saw what it wrote. The basement. We don't get to ignore this." "Fine," Ethan said, his jaw clenched. "But we all go together." We were all shaking as we descended the creaking stairs into the basement. The air grew colder with every step, the damp smell of earth and decay thick in my nose. Our flashlight beams flickered as though struggling to push through the suffocating darkness. The humming started again, faint and discordant, coming from somewhere deeper in the room. "What is that?" Claire whispered, clutching my arm. "I don't know," I said, though the sound was already making my skin crawl. The journal had fallen open in Leah's hands, and she read aloud as we moved. "It's a passage," she said. "He wrote about something being buried here, something that shouldn't have been disturbed." "What is it?" Ryan asked, his voice sharp with fear. "I don't know," Leah murmured. "But it's old, older than the house, older than the village." The sound grew louder as we reached the far end of the basement. There, nestled against the stone foundation, was a pile of rotting wooden crates. "Help me move these," Leah said, her voice trembling. "No way," Jamie said. "That's where the noise is coming from." "Exactly," Leah snapped, her patience fraying. "If we don't figure this out, we're dead anyway. Do you want to just sit here and wait for it to come to us?" Reluctantly, Ethan and Ryan helped her. The crates were heavier than they looked, and as we moved them, the humming changed, becoming sharper, higher-pitched, almost like laughter. Behind the crates was a jagged hole in the floor. The edges were blackened, as though burned, and a faint, icy mist was rising from it. "Don't go near it," Claire said, backing away. "I'm serious. Don't touch it." "Leah," I said, stepping closer to her. "We've seen enough. Whatever this is, it doesn't want us here." But Leah was staring into the hole, transfixed. Her flashlight beam barely pierced the darkness below. The mist swirled like it was alive, curling up toward her outstretched hand. "We have to know," she whispered. "No," Ethan snapped, grabbing her arm and pulling her back. "You heard what it said upstairs. Do not open it." The humming stopped abruptly, and then we heard it, a voice, low and guttural, coming from deep within the hole. It didn't speak words, not exactly, but I could feel its meaning, cold and sharp as broken glass. "You woke me." I don't know who screamed first, but suddenly we were all running, stumbling over each other in our desperation to get back up the stairs. The air seemed to grow heavier, clawing at my chest as we climbed. The basement door loomed ahead, barely visible in the flickering flashlight beams. Behind us, the voice came again, louder this time. "Do not run." The basement door slammed shut just as we reached it, the impact rattling the old wood. Leah yanked at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. "Open it," Jamie shouted, pounding on the door. "I'm trying," Leah cried, and then the humming returned, deafening now, vibrating through the walls, the floor, my bones. The cold became unbearable, like a weight pressing down on me. I could feel it coming closer, and then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The door swung open on its own, and we tumbled into the hallway, gasping for air. Upstairs, the fire was out, and the frost on the windows was thicker than ever. We didn't speak for a long time. I couldn't stop staring at the basement door, half expecting it to burst open at any second. "We need to get out of here," Ryan said finally, his voice hoarse. Leah didn't respond. She was still holding the journal, staring at a passage near the back. "What does it say?" I asked. She hesitated, then looked up at us, her face pale. "It says we can't leave." "What do you mean, we can't leave?" Claire demanded. Leah swallowed hard. "It says, once you wake it, the snow keeps you here, until it's done with you." We spent the next hour arguing about what to do. Leah insisted we couldn't leave, that the journal had been clear. Ryan wanted to try anyway, even if it meant digging our way through the snow. Claire begged for us to just stay put, to not provoke whatever was down there any further. Ethan paced back and forth, running his hands through his hair, muttering about how none of this was possible. I just sat by the window, staring out at the snow. It didn't look like snow anymore. Not really. It was too smooth, too perfect, as if the entire village had been buried under a single, unbroken sheet of white. "Hey guys," I said quietly, interrupting the argument. "Where's the car?" Everyone froze. "What do you mean, where's the car?" Jamie asked, frowning. "I mean it's gone," I said, gesturing to the window. They all rushed over, crowding around the frost-rimmed glass. The driveway where we'd parked was completely covered, the snow rising in a thick drift that swallowed everything. There wasn't even a bump to suggest the car was still underneath. "It has to be there," Ethan said, his voice rising. "It's just covered. It's gone," Leah said flatly, cutting him off. "The journal said the snow would keep us here. That's what it's doing." We decided to stay together in the living room. No one wanted to admit it, but we were terrified of being alone. We piled blankets on the floor near the fire, which we'd managed to relight, and took turns keeping watch, though none of us really slept. At some point in the night, the noises started again. They were faint at first, soft creaks and thuds, like footsteps in the walls. Then came the whispers. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but they sounded closer each time, weaving through the room like threads of ice-cold air. And then, around 3 a.m., there was a knock at the door. It was slow and deliberate, 3 sharp raps that echoed through the silent house. "Don't answer it," Claire whispered, clutching my arm. "Who the hell would be out there in this storm?" Jamie hissed. We all stared at the door, at the frost creeping along its edges. The knock came again, louder this time. Ethan grabbed the fireplace poker, his jaw clenched. "I'll do it." "No," Leah said firmly, stepping in front of him. "We don't open the door. Not for anyone." "But what if it's not," she snapped. "You know it's not." The knocking stopped. For a moment, we thought that was the end of it. But then we heard it, a slow, dragging sound like something heavy being pulled through the snow. "It's circling the house," Ryan whispered, his eyes wide. "Oh God, it's going around the house." The sound stopped beneath the window. We all turned toward it, holding our breath. The frost on the glass began to shift, just like before, forming a new word. "Watching." "Turn off the lights," Leah hissed. We scrambled to extinguish the fire and douse the candles, plunging the room into darkness. For a long time, none of us moved, barely even breathing. I could feel the cold seeping into my bones. And then I saw it, a shape, faint but unmistakable, moving past the window. It was tall and thin, wrapped in tattered white cloth that fluttered in the wind. Its face was hidden in shadow, but I could feel it watching us, its gaze sharp and unrelenting. "What do we do?" Claire whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We wait," Leah said, gripping the journal like it was a lifeline. "We don't move, and we wait." The shape lingered outside for hours. At some point, it disappeared, but none of us dared to relax. The frost on the windows had begun to crawl inward, spreading along the walls and ceiling like veins. "We can't stay here," Jamie said finally. "I don't care what that thing is or what the journal says. If we stay, we're going to die. How do you plan to leave?" Ryan snapped. "Did you forget the snow swallowed our car?" "Then we walk," Jamie said, his voice firm. "We bundle up, stick together, and head for the next town. It can't be more than a few miles, right? We'll make it." "It won't let us," Leah said quietly. Jamie glared at her. "You don't know that." "Yes, I do," she said, meeting his gaze. "The journal." "I don't care about the damn journal," Jamie shouted. The rest of us flinched, but Leah didn't back down. "You should, because if you leave this house, it's not just the snow you have to worry about." Despite Leah's warnings, Jamie's plan was starting to sound more appealing. The house felt less like a refuge and more like a trap, the air growing heavier with each passing hour. Even Leah seemed to be wavering, her eyes darting toward the frost-covered windows every few minutes. Finally, she sighed. "Fine," she said. "We'll try. But if we leave this house, we have to stick together. No splitting up, no matter what. Promise me." We all nodded. The decision was made just after dawn, or what we assumed was dawn, since the sky never really brightened. Heavy clouds churned overhead, and the snow fell in dense, relentless waves. The wind was a constant howl, rattling the house and making the floorboards tremble beneath our feet. We bundled up in every layer we could find. Scarves, gloves, mismatched socks, anything that might shield us from the cold. Leah insisted on bringing the journal, clutching it tightly as if it held some kind of power. Before we left, we stood in a small circle by the front door, our breaths fogging the air. "Stay close," Leah said, her voice firm but trembling. "Whatever happens out there, don't stop. Don't look back. And if you see anything strange, Don't follow it. No matter what. No one argued. The moment we stepped outside, the cold hit like a wall, stealing the breath from my lungs. The snow was up to our knees, and the wind tore at us with icy claws. The village was unrecognizable, buried under thick drifts of snow that erased all sense of direction. Which way? Ryan shouted over the wind. Leah pointed toward what should have been the main road, though it was impossible to tell for sure. The snow had smoothed over everything, hiding fences, trees, and even the edges of the houses. We trudged forward in a tight line, each step an effort. The wind screamed in our ears, drowning out everything but the crunch of our boots in the snow. At first, it was just the cold and the wind, but then the whispers started. I couldn't make out the words, but they seemed to come from all directions, threading through the air like icy tendrils. The others heard them too. I could tell by the way Claire kept glancing over her shoulder, her face pale with fear. "It's just the wind," Ethan muttered, as if trying to convince himself. Just the wind. But then we saw the first figure. It was faint at first, barely a shadow in the swirling snow. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, but then it moved, slow and deliberate, walking parallel to our path. "Do you see that?" Jamie asked, his voice sharp with panic. "Don't look at it," Leah said, her tone like iron. "Just keep moving." The figure wasn't alone. As we pushed forward, more shapes began to emerge from the snow. They moved silently, gliding through the drifts like wraiths. Some were tall and thin, their forms wrapped in tattered cloth. Others were smaller, hunched, their faces hidden beneath deep hoods. None of them approached, but they stayed close, their presence an oppressive weight on my chest. "Are they watching us?" Claire whispered. No one answered. We pressed on for what felt like hours, the snow growing deeper, the whispers louder. The shapes in the snow grew bolder, stepping closer, their outlines sharper. My legs burned with the effort of walking, and my face stung from the wind. At some point, Ethan stopped. "Do you hear that?" he asked, turning his head toward the shadows. "Ethan, no," Leah said sharply. "Keep moving." But he didn't. He stood there, staring into the snow, his expression blank. "Ethan!" Jamie shouted, grabbing his arm. Ethan blinked, as if waking from a dream, and shook his head. "Sorry," he muttered. "I thought I heard." He trailed off, his gaze lingering on the shadows. We didn't wait to find out what he thought he'd heard. The snow grew deeper still, and soon it was up to our waists. My body was screaming for rest, but Leah wouldn't let us stop. She kept glancing at the journal, muttering under her breath as if it held some kind of secret. "What does it say?" I asked, panting. She didn't answer. The whispers grew louder. The shadows were everywhere now, circling us, their forms shifting and indistinct. I could feel them watching, their gazes cold and unrelenting. And then the wind stopped. For the first time all day, the air fell completely still. The silence was deafening, pressing in from all sides. The shadows froze, their forms sharp and motionless against the white expanse. And then we heard it, a single voice, low and guttural, coming from somewhere ahead. "You cannot leave." Leah turned to us, her face pale but determined. "Run," she said. "What?" Ryan stammered. "Run," she shouted, shoving him forward. We didn't need to be told twice. We ran, stumbling through the snow, our legs burning with every step. The shadows surged around us, their forms closing in, their whispers rising to a deafening roar. I don't know how long we ran. The world was a blur of white and black, the snow and the shadows blending into one. I could barely see the others, their forms faint in the storm. And then, suddenly, the snow broke. We didn't stop running. The snow seemed to thin as we pushed forward, the wind fading into silence. Eventually, the shadows disappeared, swallowed by the storm. A few kilometers beyond the village, we stumbled onto a desolate stretch of road. Exhausted and half-frozen, we flagged down an old, rattling bus heading in the opposite direction. The driver didn't ask where we'd come from, and we didn't offer an explanation. The ride home was quiet. None of us spoke, not about the house, the snow, or the shadows that had watched us from the storm. To this day, we don't know what it was or why it let us leave, but we've never brought it up again. And that's the story our subscriber shared with us. A chilling memory that still haunts him and his friends to this day. What do you think really happened in that village? Was it just their imaginations, or something far more sinister? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell for more eerie tales. And if you have a story of your own, send it to us via the email in the description. We'd love to hear it. Until next time, stay safe and watch out for what might be hiding in the snow.